Ukraine and US-backed fighters just sprung the perfect trap, and Russia walked straight into hell. The foundation of this ambush wasn't built with steel and concrete, but with data. Ukraine's strategy was a masterclass in intelligence integration, weaving together disparate sources into a single, coherent operational picture. High-resolution satellite imagery provided the strategic overview, mapping the terrain and identifying potential Russian staging areas and supply routes long before they were active. This macro-level view was the first layer of a meticulously planned trap, but satellites only show so much. To get the granular detail needed for a tactical ambush, they relied on a constant, layered presence of unmanned aerial vehicles. The final critical element was timing, specifically, seasonal timing. As autumn gave way to winter, the dense forests of the Donbass, which had provided excellent cover for months, began to shed their leaves. This natural change was a tactical trigger. With the foliage gone, the forest canopy opened up. Thermal and optical sensors on reconnaissance drones could now penetrate to the forest floor with unprecedented clarity. What was once a sanctuary of concealment became a transparent battle space. Recon teams could now detect movement earlier, track units with greater persistence, and feed that real-time data directly to assault elements waiting in position. This wasn't a passive defense. The plan wasn't just to block Russian infiltrators, it was to actively manipulate their movements. Ukrainian commanders designed a funnel. Using their detailed understanding of the terrain, they identified the paths of least resistance Russian units would likely take. They then systematically applied pressure on the flanks, using nuisance raids and artillery to subtly guide the advancing forces away from forested cover and into pre-selected engagement areas. Every element of the plan was geared toward channeling the enemy into a specific corridor. Winter stripped the forest bare. For the Russian forces, this meant a catastrophic collapse of concealment. For the Ukrainian defenders, visibility surged. The stark contrast of soldiers and equipment against the pale, frozen ground made targets easy to acquire. This environmental shift had a direct technological impact. With fewer physical obstructions, the radio frequency environment cleared. FPV drone links, often tenuous in dense woods, became more stable and could be maintained over longer distances. The entire ISR picture sharpened, transforming from a grainy, intermittent feed into a high-definition, persistent stare. This clarity allowed for methodical, painstaking work. Every potential Russian hide, every dugout, trench spur, and depression in the earth became a numbered grid coordinate. Each location was logged, continuously watched by overflying drones, and queued for action in a digital targeting system. The battlefield was no longer a landscape. It was a database. The primary objective was clear: push Russian assault teams out of the relative safety of the tree lines and force them toward the open approaches to Yampil. This was the mouth of the funnel. Here, there were no trees. There was no terrain masking. It was a flat, featureless expanse. A textbook kill zone, deliberately chosen and prepared. The killing ground was meticulously prepared. Artillery batteries were pre-registered on key points, road junctions, and likely assembly areas. This meant that when the call for fire came, shells could be sent on their way in seconds, without the need for ranging shots. Overhead, multiple drones were tasked with overwatch, ensuring no movement went unseen. Observation, timing, and control were locked in. The sensor-to-shooter link was optimized for speed, turning raw observation into kinetic effect with minimal delay. The trap was set. Snipers, anti-tank teams, and FPV drone pilots moved into their final concealed positions, their fields of fire interlocking to cover the entire engagement area. When the trees went bare, the ambush went live, and there was nowhere left to hide. The arrival of Western multi-role fighters marked a turning point in the air war. After months of intensive training and logistical preparations, Ukraine's newly acquired F-16s began flying daily sorties, executing both defensive and offensive missions. These aircraft represented a significant leap in capability, bringing advanced avionics, superior radar systems, and a wider array of precision munitions to the front. Their integration was not just about adding more airframes, it was about fundamentally changing the tactical equation in the skies over Ukraine. The effectiveness of these jets was magnified by a constant, unseen network of support. Allied fighters and ISR platforms, operating in international airspace, provided a steady stream of critical intelligence. This off-board sensor data, fused with local intelligence from Ukrainian sources, amplified the F-16's reach and allowed for precise, timely strikes. It enabled Ukrainian pilots to build a comprehensive picture of the battlespace long before their own radars could detect a threat, giving them a decisive advantage in situational awareness. In the offensive role, close air support became a primary mission. The imagery from these sorties underscores a brutal but effective purpose: break enemy columns, and just as importantly, break their morale. The psychological impact of a high-speed jet appearing overhead, followed by precise munitions, cannot be overstated. It sowed chaos and fear among retreating units, disrupting command and control and turning orderly withdrawals into panicked routes. This was not random chance. Every strike was the result of a tightly synchronized kill chain, linking ISR and strike timing directly to the movements of Ukrainian ground maneuver elements. The goal was to ensure that air power was applied at the exact moment and location where it would have the most devastating effect on the enemy, while minimizing any risk to friendly forces. Planners prioritized high-value targets essential for sustaining a coherent defense or retreat. These included established retreat routes, vulnerable supply trucks carrying fuel and ammunition, and hastily assembled field command posts. By systematically eliminating these nodes, Ukrainian air power aimed to paralyze the Russian forces, cutting off their logistical lifeline and decapitating their leadership structure on the battlefield. Defensively, these jets proved equally vital, acting as a high-speed, rapid reaction force. They have intercepted swarms of airborne threats, from low-flying cruise missiles to waves of one-way attack drones that previously saturated ground-based air defenses. The F-16's look-down, shoot-down radar and advanced air-to-air missiles allowed them to engage and destroy these threats with a high probability of success. According to Ukrainian military reports, this small but potent fleet has claimed over 1,300 successful interceptions, alongside hundreds of ground strikes. These numbers highlight the dual-role effectiveness of the platform, serving as both a shield for Ukrainian cities and a sword against Russian ground forces. In the ground attack role, reports indicate more than 300 key targets were hit, often under extremely difficult conditions, including poor weather and the constant threat of sophisticated Russian air defense systems. The key to this success was a relentlessly efficient cycle of air-ground coordination, boiled down to a simple mantra: find, fix, finish, on, repeat. This process, honed through months of combat, became the backbone of the entire operation. The process was ruthlessly efficient. Drones, operated by special forces or reconnaissance units, would find and mark a target. Forward air controllers, often embedded with ground troops, would verify the target, deconflict the airspace, and clear the pilot to engage. Finally, the jets would prosecute the target, often from a standoff distance, before quickly aggressing. As Russian forces were forced out of the dense woods and onto open roads, the skies above became a killing ground. The combination of persistent surveillance from drones and the rapid response of fighter-bombers created a lethal trap from which there was little escape. On the ground, this effort was bolstered by foreign volunteers, many of them American combat veterans. Their experience proved invaluable as they integrated with Ukrainian recon and assault teams, bringing specialized skills in reconnaissance, direct action, and coordinating air support. Their impact was felt directly on the front lines. In one documented case near Lyman, an American volunteer, working alongside Ukrainian forces, was instrumental in helping to secure the surrender of 4 Russian soldiers, a small but significant victory that saved lives on both sides. This fusion of old and new tactics was widespread. Snipers extended their reach by pairing with drone operators. The drone provided overwatch and real-time targeting data, allowing the sniper to engage targets from extreme distances with incredible precision, a lethal pairing of human skill and robotic eyes. Despite operating a relatively small fleet, the Ukrainian Air Force achieved remarkable effectiveness. It's reported that roughly 80% of all combat sorties were being flown on the newly acquired F-16s, a testament to their reliability, versatility, and the skill of the pilots and ground crews maintaining them under wartime pressure. These daily missions were the embodiment of a dual strategy, serving as a shield to protect Ukrainian skies and a sword to strike at the heart of the invading force. The introduction of Western air power did not win the war on its own, but it was a critical enabler. Air power kept the timing and created opportunities. The ground forces set the conditions and exploited those opportunities. Together, they methodically closed the trap. Thermals picked up columns moving out of the belts. Timing was unforgiving. Paths in, paths out, all under watch. The funnel closed on the settlement approaches. FPVs finished what ISR began. Precision at distance pinned every movement. Pre-sighted guns erased junctions, air-sealed exits, multiple axes, same minute. Open ground offered nothing back. One wreck became a wall. And then, silence. Hammer met anvil. The ambush completed. Mission phase change. Assess and exploit. In the aftermath, the roads around Yampil told a brutal story. The landscape was a graveyard of ambition, littered with the skeletal remains of armored vehicles, abandoned equipment, and the grim detritus of a shattered assault. With the sparse winter foliage offering zero concealment, Russian columns had been caught in the open, transforming frozen fields and barren tree lines into kill zones. The scale of the destruction wasn't just a setback, it was a comprehensive tactical failure, visible for miles. Post-battle damage assessments confirmed the rout. Ukrainian analysis highlighted eliminated command posts, neutralized artillery positions, and critically, blocked supply and retreat routes that turned the initial push into a one-way trip. The collapse wasn't random. It was the result of 3 systemic Russian failures that Ukraine expertly exploited. First, exposure. Russian commanders failed to adapt their tactics to the harsh realities of winter warfare, pushing units forward without adequate cover or camouflage. Second, Ukrainian ISR dominance. A persistent, multi-layered network of drones, satellites, and electronic intelligence provided a real-time, God's-eye view of the battlefield. And third, widening gaps in Russian air defense coverage, which created fatal vulnerabilities. This degradation began weeks earlier. Chuar's reported strikes on December 2nd, targeting key radar installations, were not isolated events. They were part of a systematic campaign to blind Russian air defenses across the Donbass, creating safe corridors for Ukrainian air assets to operate closer to the front. Into these corridors flew Ukraine's newly operational F-16s. Flying daily combat sorties, they performed a dual role, intercepting incoming cruise missiles and guided bombs, and more decisively, conducting precision strikes on high-value ground targets near the front lines. Despite a small initial fleet and operational constraints, their impact was immediate. Ukrainian sources claimed over 300 ground targets were hit in the initial operational period, a mix of command centers, ammunition depots, and troop concentrations. In the air, they proved equally vital, credited with neutralizing more than 1,300 airborne threats, from drones to missiles, relieving pressure on ground-based air defense systems. This small fleet was punching far above its weight, reportedly accounting for a large share of all Ukrainian combat aviation sorties. On the ground, special operations forces and sniper teams acted as force multipliers, using the winter conditions to their advantage. They infiltrated Russian rear areas, targeting officers and disrupting logistics, amplifying the chaos caused by artillery and airstrikes. The Russian ranks, heavily reliant on poorly trained and ill-equipped conscripts, were unprepared for this combined arms pressure. Lacking proper winter gear and low on morale, they were brittle. Consequently, daily losses, as reported by the Ukrainian General Staff, remained severe, peaking at over 1,100 in a single day during the offensive's climax. The calm takeaway is a masterclass in modern warfare. Season, terrain, and timing, when fused with superior ISR and integrated air power, are decisive. Ukraine didn't just stop an attack, it orchestrated a collapse. This wasn't luck, it was design. A deliberate, calculated fusion of intelligence, patience, and firepower. Independent analysts concurred, assessing the Russian pushes as tactically unsophisticated and predictable. They were textbook examples of forces vulnerable to well-prepared, well-timed traps, where initial gains only serve to draw them deeper into a pre-sighted killing ground. Assessment complete. Next, the strategic implications of this victory. The message: Ukraine can seize initiative and exploit aid effectively. In Washington and Brussels, integration of F-16s matters. Mastery of Western systems invites further support. This battle becomes a case study in counter-infiltration and kill zone design. For Russia, air defense failure and conscript reliance remain strategic liabilities. Each radar lost opens new corridors. Locally, Ukraine can press advantages where skies are permissive. Support pipelines translate to sustained pressure. Future offensives hinge on replicating this control of the air-ground link. Outcome: confidence for partners, caution for adversaries. Subscribe for more real-time battlefield intelligence from DefenseScope.